Hey guys, Torcus here. So in this video, we're going to be looking at Taliyah, one of the new champions for Shurima in the upcoming Empires of the Extended Expansion, which is adding all of this Shurima stuff to the game. She looks really cool, so we're going to dive in and do some more of these card reviews because I still need to catch up. So let's see Taliyah. So she is a 5-mana 2/4 with the play effect summon an exact copy of an allied landmark, and she levels up when you summon 5+ landmarks. It is an exact copy, so the spell from my last video that does allow you to double up on the countdown effect of a landmark is duplicatable with Taliyah. Also, it can duplicate the countdown timing on the landmark. So if it's at 1 turn left, the new one will also be at 1 turn left. So they'll go off at the same time. And that is another super good reason to be using her on it. And when she is leveled, she keeps her play effect, of course. And then when she attacks, she triggers her skill, which is Threaded Volley here. Deal 2 to my blocker. If it's dead or gone, deal 2 to the enemy nexus instead. And if you have a landmark, do this 2 more times. And she's a 3/5, of course. So, if you have a landmark, you are pinging 3 times at a blocker. That is 6 damage. And every multiple of 2 is going to be a breakpoint for you sending some of it to the face. So if you hit something with 2 health, then you're dealing 4 face damage, which sounds super sweet. She has a lot of really good landmark synergy here. I think in a heavily landmark-oriented deck that triggering 5 landmark summons by turn 5 is not going to be difficult, including the one that she does. That's another one. So if you have a landmark on board on turn 5, which you should in a deck like this, then you only need to have played 4 by that time. That is 1 per turn. If you're doing 4 turns before that, you play 1 each turn. There's also a card that summons 2 landmarks at burst speed, which can help you so that you can, miss one of those turns along the way and still hit on time. So it sounds really, really solid. And you can continually attack with her every round that your attack is up. And then she's effectively not going to be able to be blocked by anything that has less than 7 HP, which is pretty hard to do. So she'll be very, very powerful, I think, in that leveled up form. You will need a landmark for you to get that powered up effect, but having a landmark on board again is going to be very likely in a landmark oriented deck. And I really do think that exact copy of the allied landmark effect is really, really strong. There's also the Hourglass card, which has huge synergy with Taliyah because you can Hourglass one of your units and then use her effect to copy that Hourglass, and then when it opens up again, you get 2 copies of that champion back. You can even use it on one Taliyah, have the second Taliyah copy it, and then you have 3 of them on board. Interesting idea that people have been talking about. Since she triggers 3 skills on the stack, and then you can have 3 of them at the same time, or more, honestly, you can only have 9 things on the stack. So you will effectively make it impossible to cast fast speed spells in reaction to her attack because the entirety of the stack will be filled up by her skill alone. There may be changes to the game to account for that, to make sure that can't happen, because that does sound a little bit toxic, to be honest. You can also do this even more easily than that combo with a Dawn and Dusk or something in Ionia. We'll end up seeing if that ends up being addressed, because that does sound like really bad for the game, to be honest. But I think that Taliyah will definitely be a viable deck with landmarks. You might not be able to level her if there's a situation where playing all these landmarks on curve is a little bit too slow. But there are some bodies that do some landmark stuff in this package that we're going to see. So I think it'll be very viable for you to run Taliyah and do all this landmark stuff. So I'm probably she's almost one of the most exciting ones to me, just because the idea of this landmark copying thing sounds so cool. And honestly, her level up effect and everything looks super, super dope. So, yeah, I have high expectations for Taliyah, and she's going to be one of the ones that I'm playing pretty early on in the expansion. Then her champ spell is Stone Weaving, 1 mana burst speed. Look at 3 random landmarks that you can afford. Pick one to create in hand. So the fact that it picks from landmarks you can actually afford with the mana you have available is very cool. It gives you some flexibility to, a smart Runeterra player is going to have in mind exactly what landmarks they're going to have available to them. Obviously, the 1 mana ones are always going to be popping up. The 2 mana ones can potentially be popping up. I think that Sundisk is probably in this pool, so Sundisk is probably going to come up quite a lot if you don't get too high in the manas. And that's going to muddle it a little bit. But the ability to pick from one of the 3 means that you're normally going to see one that you like at least. The 1 mana fact that you're spending 1 mana normally isn't going to be too annoying. I don't know necessarily whether you're going to be running this in the deck, but off of Taliyah, it'll definitely be pretty sweet to get some cool different landmarks off of it. And in the late game, you can get some big value landmarks potentially, like Howling Abyss or whatnot. You might end up running it in the deck. You might want to do that just because it does give you some options outside of your region, I'd imagine. I think, when it says random landmarks, it should include stuff outside of your region for sure. I don't even know how you would be able to do it otherwise, just because there wouldn't be enough landmarks generally in any particular mana point early on. But yeah, I think it definitely looks decent. Again, I don't know if you're going to be running it in any decks, but getting it off of Taliyah is going to be cool. And you're definitely not going to be running it outside of a Taliyah deck or any landmark deck, but Taliyah is going to be like the only place where you're seeing like hardcore landmark decks, in my opinion. So now we have Psy Scout, 3 mana, 2/4. Play Predict. If you pick a landmark, grant me elusive. So she's another Predict card. You got the 2 mana, 2/3 Predict. This is 1 extra health, and it potentially gets elusive. I think that's definitely a good upside. Obviously, you're not going to be picking a landmark very often outside of the Taliyah decks and stuff. It is a landmark synergistic effect, so I don't necessarily think you're going to be running this in any other decks other than that. But I do think it's worth running in the Taliyah decks just because, it may not have the most attack, but it is an elusive body. And there are a decent amount of elusive things you would want to block in the meta right now. There's probably still going to be some of that. And being able to get some extra elusive damage in is always nice. So yeah, so I definitely think this will fit into some Taliyah decks. You're gonna want to make sure that you hit the landmark for sure. So you're gonna have quite a few landmarks in the deck, but I don't think that's gonna be a problem. You'll be incentivized to do that anyways. Then we have 4 mana, 2/4, Desert Naturalist. Play effect, destroy a landmark. If it is allied, summon a Grumpy Rock Bear. So Grumpy Rock Bear is a 5/4. You could potentially use this as landmark removal on your opponent's stuff. But the good thing is that even when you don't have that effect, you can still use it on allied stuff. There are some Roiling Sands, which we're going to see off of some other cards, which are kind of just token landmarks. They give vulnerable to your opponents when they're summoned. It's a good effect, but it's definitely something you'd feel okay with destroying to get a 5/4, because that's worth a lot more than 1-ish mana. Whatever you'd say, giving vulnerable only at a not a targeted way or not anything like that is worth. So yeah, like less than 1 mana, definitely better than that. So yeah, so outside of that, you could potentially just use it on your other landmarks, like if something is going to go off in a few turns, maybe you'd rather just pop it off now for the added tempo. But the fact that you do have that flexibility of if you need to destroy a landmark on your opponent's side of the board, you do have landmark removal. This is probably the best landmark removal we've had thus far, just because it does come with a body. It is like a 3 mana body. Like, it's an okay 3 mana body. Like, kind of not the best 3 mana body for 4 mana. So, like, you're not going to want to play this if there's no landmark on either side of the board, that's for sure. But if they have a landmark, then it's going to be really good, and you're definitely only going to be running it in a Taliyah deck with a bunch of landmarks. Again, basically all these decks are the case for that. Although maybe you run a few landmarks in other decks just because you do really want to get a landmark removal in your deck if it is a landmark heavy meta. Then we have Rock Hopper. When I'm summoned, summon a Roiling Sands. So as I said, Roiling Sands, when an enemy is summoned, destroy me to granted vulnerable. It's a 2 mana landmark. You're not going to be playing it, but if somehow you ever got the landmark back in your hand or whatnot, it would cost you 2 mana. So yeah, so it's something. It goes towards the Taliyah buff or Taliyah level up. It works with the Desert Naturalist summon condition for the Grumpy Rock Bear, and in the worst case scenario, it will just give something vulnerable, which isn't bad. 3/1 for 2 mana isn't a great stat line, but it's good enough. It's going to trade out with quite a few things. And I think you'll be pretty happy with this. Again, strictly in a Taliyah deck. I don't think you're ever going to want a dictated by your opponent vulnerability outside of these landmark decks with Taliyah. But this definitely works in that deck because it is accelerating you towards the level up with the landmark, as well as giving you a blocker at the same time, which is probably one of the big downsides you'd have otherwise, not being able to get tempo on board while your landmark stuff is happening. So I definitely like that for the deck. Then for the spells, we have Shaped Stone, 1 mana burst speed spell. Give an ally +1/+1 this round. If you've summoned a landmark this game, give it +3/+1 instead. So this is a Radiant Strike on base, and it's a better than it's better than Elixir of Wrath when it's buffed up because you get the health on it. It seems super good. Like the health obviously matters a lot. Like we know how often Pale Cascade has mattered, where you play it for the health, but the attack also really mattered. But this is only 1 mana. So if you can make a deck that runs landmarks and is aggressive, then in Shurima, then this is going to be amazing in that deck. And in just the Taliyah deck, where you're going to be running tons of landmarks either way, you're going to put this in because this is so efficient as a buff. Like 3+3+1 is so worth 1 mana. It's crazy. I think you will probably end up running Ancient Preparations in some of your faster decks just so that this goes off. You can it'll be a cheap landmark that you can just throw away and it won't be a problem. And it gives you prediction as well, which helps you along finding your most impactful cards at the same time. And it's still going to give you a 2/2 later. So you're not really losing out on the board in the long term. So, top tier deck or top tier card looks absolutely amazing. Then we have a burst speed spell, 3 mana, Unraveled Earth, summon 2 Roiling Sands, draw 1. So as we mentioned, Roiling Sands is the thing that gives vulnerable to a summoned enemy unit. Having 2 of them is better than having 1 of them because, they might be able to trigger the first one on something irrelevant, but putting down 2 crappy units for your vulnerables is pretty hard to do for your opponent, I think. It is cycling itself as well. Overall, you're not getting a ton for it. A lot of people wouldn't think that a 2 mana draw 1 is super good either without more to it. And this is 3 mana, and the Roiling Sands really don't do a lot. But again, it helps the Taliyah level up. It is fodder for your Desert Naturalist. So I think that in the Taliyah deck, this is maybe not for certain going to be in there, but I think it probably would make it in there. But again, I probably don't think it's going to be in other stuff. It could make sense in Renekton decks and stuff, maybe, because you do want vulnerable on them. And you are still drawing a card, so it's not absolutely terrible on that front, but you do want to go play the game pretty fast with that. Though this could be another way to make sure that you have landmarks in your Shape Stone deck outside of running Ancient Preparations or whatnot. So I think it's okay. I think it looks fine. Definitely helps Taliyah level up faster if you can't do it otherwise. Then we have Ancient Hourglass. This is absolutely nuts. Obliterate an ally and summon a stasis statue in its place, 2 mana fast speed. The stasis statue is a landmark. Countdown 1, summon an exact copy of the obliterated unit I replaced. So effectively, you are freezing the unit in stasis for 1 turn, and then you get it back exactly as it was before. This will also help you trigger summon effects again, which is nice. But most of all, this is going to be a dodge on removal, a dodge on challenges, a dodge on an easy fake blocker, where you just put something in front of block to block an attack, and then you just bail out with the Hourglass. You can even do this with tons of combos with Taliyah, like I was mentioning earlier. Because she can copy landmarks, you can copy stasis statues. And that's a very easy way to ensure that you can copy other champions that you have in your deck. Either Taliyah herself or whatever other champions you might be interested in doing that for. So lots of cool different things you can do with it. 2 mana is so cheap. So like dodging a vengeance for 2 mana, just absolutely nuts. It's better than Bastion sometimes. It's worse than Bastion in other cases where, if they go in for a vengeance when you're on an attack with a, like overwhelm unit or something, then you probably don't want to stop your attack. But in a lot of cases, this is going to be better than Bastion because it is cheaper and it looks really, really strong. I think this is definitely one of the best cards of the expansion, without a doubt. And then we have 2 landmarks for Shurima here. Hibernating Rock Bear, 2 mana, countdown 3, summon a Grumpy Rock Bear. The Grumpy Rock Bear is this 5 mana, 5/4. So if you play it on 2, you're getting the Rock Bear on 5. It's, mildly undersetted for 5 mana. 5/4 is like almost about there, but you did only play 2 mana for it. This is assuming you play it on curve. If you play it any later, you're going to be waiting a little bit. But it is a landmark to get your landmark stuff going for Taliyah, and it's a pretty decent one for her to duplicate right before it levels, or right before it finishes. So you get an extra 5/4, and that is quite a bit of tempo on board. It doesn't have any keywords or anything, so it's not going to be like an ending game threat, but it certainly does pressure your opponent, and it is a great blocker and stuff, and it doesn't include very much mana investment from your part, just some tempo loss that you will have for sure. I think this one looks like it is not the greatest thing ever. It is quite a while to wait, but I think there won't be a ton of better options. So I think you would for sure run this with Taliyah again, like a lot of these landmark cards, and I think you'd be pretty happy with how it would work out for you. You just have to make sure that the turns surrounding it do help you stabilize a bit so that you're not getting too wrecked when you're giving up that tempo. Then we have Salt Spire, 4 mana, countdown 2, and summon a Grumpy Rock Bear. Same effect there, just 1 turn earlier. And then if you summon 4+ landmarks this game, grant the strongest ally +2/+2. So that would mean you're paying 4 mana to get a Grumpy Rock Bear 1 turn later on the curve. It would be turn 6 versus turn 5. But you do have to pay more mana for it. This 4+ landmarks thing, by turn 6 doesn't seem very unlikely. I think you can definitely do that in a deck like this. The buff will probably go on the Rock Bear, so it'll end up being a 7/6. 7/6 is, pretty good on turn 6, but it's not having any keywords to like end the game. It doesn't have overwhelm or whatnot. So it's decent. This is certainly one where you want to be duplicating it so that it really feels good. So then you're getting like 2 7/6s or whatever, or I don't know, maybe I guess they're maybe putting both the buffs on the same one. So it would be a 9/8 and then a 5/4. Or if you have something else. I doubt you'll have things bigger than this in this kind of a deck. This might be one that you would rather not run. It is a little bit on the slower end, but it does have a bigger payoff. And Countdown 2 isn't very long, really. We'll have to see on this one. You definitely wouldn't run 3 copies, I wouldn't think. But it's I think the Rock Bear's a little bit more viable than this one for sure. So that's it for these cards, and that's it for this video. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what you think of Taliyah and the new landmark support cards that she's got going for her. And please subscribe if you'd like to see more of my content in the future, and I'll see you guys in the next video.